The alien colony was always full of noise. People laughed, traded, argued, and shared their food with each other. But there was one corner of the colony where silence lived, and in that silence lived a widow with her little daughter. No one came close to her. No one offered a kind word, and no one shared their food. To the colony, she was only a shadow. Her name was Lyra. She had once been the wife of a proud warrior, but her husband had died in a border raid. After his death, her world turned cold. The colony that had once called her sister now turned their faces away. For them, she was weak, useless, and unworthy. Her little daughter, barely 6 years old, often tugged on her arm and whispered, "Mama, I'm hungry." Lyra's heart broke each time. She would walk through the busy marketplace begging softly for food, but the merchants laughed. "She's only a widow," one muttered. "Her husband is gone, she is nothing now," another said. "Her child will starve and it will be her fault." Every cruel word cut deep, but Lyra never shouted back. She only lowered her head, pulled her daughter closer, and walked away. Her tears were silent. She had learned that showing pain only gave people more reason to mock. At night, in their small broken hut, her daughter cried herself to sleep on an empty stomach. Lyra would sit awake, staring at the shadows on the wall, wondering if life would always be like this. Sometimes she whispered to herself, "Am I cursed?" But then whispers began to spread in the colony. People spoke in fear, their voices low and trembling. "There is a human here," one trader said. "A dangerous one. He eats meat. Real meat. They say his teeth are sharp like an animal's. Stay away from him. He is not like us." The word human was always followed by fear. Aliens in this colony believed humans were violent and cruel, dangerous creatures who only thought about hunting and killing. For them, a human was a beast wearing the skin of a man. But Lyra was curious. She had never seen a human. She had only heard the stories. And deep inside her starving heart, a strange thought whispered, "If he is strong and dangerous, maybe he could protect someone weak. Someone like me." One day while begging in the market, she saw him. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and his eyes were sharp like they could see through every lie, every secret. His clothes were simple, rough, and carried the smell of smoke and fire. People moved away from him as if he carried death on his shoulders. Her daughter, clutching her hand, looked up and whispered, "Mama, is that him?" "The human?" Lyra nodded slowly. She felt her heart race, fear mixed with a strange spark of hope. The human walked through the market silently. He did not beg, he did not shout, he did not even look at the merchants. He moved with the calmness of someone who had seen too many battles, too many betrayals. When he passed near Lyra, the merchants suddenly grew bold. "Widow," one shouted. "Maybe you should go to him. A beast and a cursed woman, perfect for each other." Everyone laughed cruelly. Lyra pulled her daughter close, her cheeks burning with shame. But the human stopped. His eyes turned to the merchant, and the laughter died instantly. His gaze was cold, hard, and dangerous. Without saying a word, he turned away and continued walking. But just before leaving, his eyes met Lyra's. For the first time in years, she did not see mockery or pity in someone's gaze. She saw something else. Recognition, like he understood her suffering without a single word. That night, Lyra could not sleep. Her daughter asked softly, "Mama, why did he look at us like that?" Lyra shook her head. "I don't know, child." But in her heart, she felt the first spark of something new. Not love, not yet, but hope. The next day, she returned to the market. She had no food, no coins, only her child's small hand in her own. And there he was again, the human. People still avoided him, still whispered about his teeth, his meat, his danger. But Lyra could not look away. She felt as if fate had placed a question in front of her. Would she continue living in shadows? Or would she step closer to the beast everyone feared? As the sun set and the market began to close, the human turned his head. His eyes found her again. This time he did not look away. Lyra's heart pounded. For the first time in years, she felt alive. Not because she was safe, but because danger itself had noticed her. And deep inside, a thought grew stronger, maybe, just maybe. This feared human was not her enemy. Maybe he was her only chance at a future. The next morning, the market was alive again. Merchants shouted, children played, and smells of cooked roots and fruits filled the air. But whenever the human appeared, silence followed him like a shadow. People lowered their voices. Mothers pulled their children closer, and no one dared to step in his path. He was known simply as Kale. The colony did not know where he came from. Some whispered he had escaped from a human warship. Others claimed he was banished from his kind. But everyone agreed on one thing: he was dangerous. They called him the carnivorous stranger. Lyra, the widow, watched him from a distance. She should have been afraid like everyone else. Instead, her eyes followed his every move. Her daughter Nira clung to her hand and asked in a whisper, "Mama, why do they fear him so much?" "Because he is different," Lyra replied softly, "and people fear what they do not understand." That day, Kyle stopped at a stall selling dried roots. The merchant trembled as he placed the goods in front of him. Kale's voice was deep, calm, and steady when he spoke. "How much?" The merchant stammered. Take it. Take it and go," Kale frowned. He reached into his pouch and dropped shiny coins on the stall. "I pay for what I take." His words were firm, leaving no space for argument. Lyra watched in silence. A man feared by all, yet he still followed honor. Something stirred in her heart, but the true test came moments later. Nira, too hungry to think, slipped from her mother's grasp and tried to reach a piece of fruit rolling on the ground. Before Lyra could stop her, she bumped into Kale's leg. The whole market gasped. "Child," someone shouted. She touched him. "Get her away before he eats her," cried another. Lyra rushed forward, panic in her chest, but what she saw made her freeze. Kale bent down slowly, his sharp eyes softening as he looked at the small girl. He picked up the fruit, wiped it with his rough sleeve, and placed it gently in Nira's little hands. "Eat," he said simply. The market fell silent. No one had ever seen him show kindness. Nira looked at the fruit, then at him. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice small but clear. Kyle nodded once, then stood tall again. His gaze swept the market, daring anyone to speak. No one did. Lyra's heart pounded. For years she had begged for even a scrap of food, and no one had shown mercy. But this man, feared as a beast, had fed her daughter without hesitation. She lowered her head, whispering, "Why would he do this?" That evening, as the market closed, Lyra gathered courage. She walked toward Kale while holding her daughter's hand. Her legs trembled, but her will pushed her forward. Kale noticed her approach. His sharp eyes studied her, unreadable and calm. "You should not come near me," he said in a low voice. "They will mock you more if you do." Lyra swallowed her fear. "They already mock me. I have nothing left to lose." Kale's expression shifted, almost like a shadow of respect crossed his face. He looked at the little girl holding the fruit tightly. "Your child is brave," he said. "Most would run from me." "She is hungry," Lyra whispered. "Hunger does not fear anyone." For the first time, Kale's lips curved, not into a smile, but into something softer than his usual hard face. "Hunger, I know that pain too well." Before Lyra could ask more, voices rose around them. A group of alien men had gathered, their faces twisted with anger. "Widow," one shouted. "Shame on you standing near that beast. You dishonor your husband's memory." Another spat. "Do you want your child eaten alive?" Lyra froze, her courage slipping. But before she could step back, Kale moved. He stood in front of her and her daughter, his body a shield. His voice was like steel. "Touch them and you will regret it." The men hesitated. His presence alone was like a wall of fire, unmovable and dangerous. They muttered curses but backed away, not brave enough to test him. When they were gone, Lyra whispered, "Why? Why would you protect us?" Kale looked at her with steady eyes. "Because I see myself in you, alone, cast out, surrounded by enemies, but still standing." Those words struck her heart like lightning. For years she had felt invisible, worthless. Yet this feared human had looked at her and seen strength. Before leaving, Kale bent slightly toward Nira. "Little one," he said, his voice almost gentle, "never bow your head. Even when the world calls you nothing, remember, you are still alive." "That is enough." Nira's eyes sparkled, and for the first time, she smiled without fear. As Kale walked away into the fading light, Lyra realized something terrifying and wonderful at the same time. The carnivorous stranger was not just dangerous. He was the first person in years who had treated her and her daughter like they mattered. And deep in her heart, she knew this was only the beginning. The following days in the colony carried whispers wherever Lyra walked. People did not mock her quietly anymore. They pointed openly, their voices sharp with hatred. "Look at her, the widow follows the beast now," one alien sneered. "She will sell her child next," another spat. "Disgraceful." She is cursed. Lyra kept her head low, but inside, shame and fire burned together. For years she had accepted cruelty, but something had changed. Kyle's words still echoed in her heart. Even when the world calls you nothing, remember you are still alive. Her daughter Nira had changed too. Where once her small eyes were tired from hunger, now they carried a spark of hope. Every day she waited near the market, hoping to see Kale. And every time he appeared, her face lit up. One afternoon, Kale returned from the nearby forests carrying meat from a hunt. The aliens turned away in disgust. He eats animals like a monster, they muttered. But Nira, bold and fearless, ran toward him. Did you catch this yourself? She asked, her voice full of wonder. Kale glanced at her, surprised. Yes, do you want some? The child nodded eagerly. Lyra rushed forward, panic on her face. No, Nira, you cannot. But Kale knelt down, tearing off a small cooked piece from the bundle he carried. This is safe. Try it. Nira hesitated, then tasted it. Her eyes widened. Mama, it is good! The market gasped. An alien child eating meat? To them it was unthinkable. But to Nira it was life. Kale's steady gaze moved to Lyra. She needs strength. This will keep her alive. Lyra's heart pounded. Everything she had been taught told her to refuse. But her daughter's thin arms and hollow cheeks left her no choice. She took a piece and placed it on her lips. The taste was strange, strong, unlike the dry roots she had eaten all her life. Yet it filled her stomach in a way nothing else had. That night in their hut, Lyra thought of Kale's gift. Perhaps, she whispered to herself, the beast everyone fears is more human than any of us. The next morning she found Kale waiting outside her hut. He carried a bundle of wood and meat. You cannot survive on pity, he said simply. Take this. Lyra hesitated. Accepting his help meant more shame from the colony. But as she looked at Nira, smiling with hope for the first time in years, she swallowed her fear. Thank you, she whispered. From that day on, Kale came often. Sometimes he brought food, sometimes firewood, sometimes nothing but his presence. Slowly, the silence between them grew into words. Lyra learned he had once belonged to a human crew. They had betrayed him during a raid, leaving him stranded. He had survived by hunting and fighting, always alone. His voice carried no sadness, only acceptance. The world shows no mercy, he told her. So I became strong enough not to need it. Yet when he looked at her and Nira, his eyes softened, as though he saw something worth protecting. Nira began calling him Uncle Kale, though the whispers in the colony gave him darker names. Children were warned to stay away, but Nira ran into his arms without fear. One evening, as the sun painted the sky red, Kyle sat outside Lyra's hut sharpening his blade. Nira leaned against him, asking endless questions about hunting, about fire, about stars. Why do people hate you? She asked suddenly. Kale paused. His eyes flickered to Lyra before answering. Because I am different, and people hate what they cannot control. Then I am like you, the little girl said proudly. Because they hate me and Mama too. Kale looked at her for a long moment. His rough hand gently brushed her hair. Yes, little one, you are like me, and that means you are stronger than they know. Lyra's throat tightened. She turned away quickly, hiding the tears in her eyes. No one had ever spoken of her daughter with such pride, but peace never lasts long in a world of cruelty. The more Kale visited them, the more violent the colony's hatred grew. One night, stones were thrown at their hut. Nira screamed as Lyra pulled her close. Outside voices cursed, beast lover, traitor widow, leave our colony or die. Before Lyra could react, Kale appeared, his blade gleaming in the firelight. He stood tall, his voice a roar. Come then. If you want blood, take mine first. The mob hesitated. His eyes burned with a fury that made even the boldest step back. No one dared to strike. Slowly, one by one, they slipped away into the shadows, their courage broken. When silence returned, Kyle sheathed his blade and turned to Lyra. For the first time, his voice was not hard. It was almost gentle. I will not let them hurt you. Or the child. Lyra's hands trembled as she whispered, Why do you care? We are nothing to you. Kale looked at her, his expression unreadable. Then he spoke words that shook her to her soul. You are not nothing. You are the only ones who make me feel human again. The words hung in the air like fire. Lyra's heart beat fast, her breath uneven. She had lived in shadows for so long, unseen and unwanted. Yet in the eyes of the most feared man in the colony, She had become visible. And though fear still lived in her heart, a new truth began to grow inside her. Perhaps their bond was not just unlikely. Perhaps it was destiny. The colony was restless. Whispers had turned to shouts, and shouts were turning into plans. Each passing day, the sight of Kale visiting Lyra's hut made the aliens angrier. To them it was shameful. A widow clinging to a beast, a child laughing with a monster. At first they only mocked. But soon they plotted. Lyra felt the weight of their hatred every time she stepped into the market. Mothers pulled their children away. Merchants refused to sell her food, and men spat on the ground where she walked. One woman hissed, "Stay with your human. Let him feed you like an animal." Another shouted, "You will bring ruin on us all." Lyra held Nira's hand tighter and walked faster. Inside, fear clawed at her, but she remembered Kale's words, "Never bow your head." She forced herself to keep walking with her chin lifted. That evening, Kale arrived with hunted meat. He noticed the bruise on Lyra's arm where a merchant had shoved her. His jaw tightened. "Who did this?" His voice was low, but it carried danger like a blade. "It does not matter," Lyra whispered. "If you fight them, they will only hate us more." "They already hate us," Kale growled. "But I will not allow them to touch you again." For the first time since her husband's death, Lyra felt the strange warmth of safety. Kyle was not like the others. He did not see her as worthless. He protected her as if her pain was his own. Still, doubt troubled her. One night when Nira was asleep, Lyra asked the question that burned in her heart. "Why do you care for us, Kyle? You are human. We are not your kind." Kale stared into the fire, the flames reflecting in his eyes. His silence stretched long before he spoke. "My kind left me to die," he said at last. "They betrayed me when I trusted them. I swore I would never let myself be weak again." He looked at her then, his gaze steady and sharp. "But when I saw you in the market, you reminded me of myself, alone, cast out, still standing. I know that pain, and I will not let you carry it alone." Lyra's breath caught. His words pierced through years of loneliness, reaching a part of her heart she thought was long dead. But the colony was not done testing them. One morning, as Kale left to hunt, a group of men cornered Lyra. They surrounded her hut, sneers on their faces. "Tell him to leave this colony," one demanded. "He is cursed," another spat. "If you stay with him, we will take your child," the third threatened. Fear gripped her, but she stood tall. "My child is mine. You will not touch her." They laughed cruelly. "You think a widow can stop us?" At that moment, Kale returned. His eyes darkened when he saw them. Without a word, he stepped between Lyra and the men. "Try," he said coldly, his hand on his blade. "Touch her or the girl, and you will not live to regret it." The men backed away, but their hatred only grew. They spat curses as they retreated, vowing revenge. When they were gone, Lyra looked at Kale. "Why risk your life for us?" His reply was simple. "Because you are worth it." That night, Kale sat outside with Nira while she asked endless questions. She climbed onto his lap, holding his arm. "Uncle Kale, will you always stay with us?" Kale's rough voice softened. "If your mother allows it, I will never leave." From the doorway, Lyra heard his words. Her heart ached with fear and longing. Could she trust him? Could she allow herself to believe in him when all others had betrayed her? Her daughter already trusted him completely. And truth be told, Lyra's own heart leaned toward him more each day. But shadows of doubt still whispered, what if he leaves too? What if his kindness is only for now? A test soon came. One stormy night, fire broke out in the market. The flames spread quickly, turning the night red with smoke. People screamed as stalls collapsed and chaos filled the air. Amid the panic, Nira was trapped between falling beams. Lyra screamed her daughter's name, rushing forward, but the fire was too strong. Before she could reach her, Kyle ran through the flames. His arm shielded his face, his body moving with fearless strength. With one swing, he lifted the burning beam and pulled Nira into his arms. The crowd gasped as he carried the child out, his back scorched by sparks, his skin marked by smoke. He set her down gently in Lyra's arms. "She is safe," he said, his voice steady even though his body shook from burns. Lyra held her daughter, tears streaming down her face. She looked at Kyle, who stood like a wall even against fire, and in that moment her doubts broke. This man, feared as a beast, had risked his life for them. Not for power, not for gain, but because he cared. When the fire finally died and the colony stood in ruins, whispers spread again. But this time they were not only of fear. He saved the child, some murmured. He went into fire without thought for himself, others admitted. Perhaps he is not only a beast. For Lyra, the truth was already clear. She had been tested by fear, by shame, and by doubt, and Cale had proven himself again and again. As she watched him sit silently by the fire, his burned hands wrapped in cloth, she realized something. Trust was no longer a question. It was already hers to give. And though danger still surrounded them, her heart whispered one truth. Kyle was no stranger anymore. The colony was still scarred from the fire. Charred beams lay in piles, smoke lingered in the air, and merchants wept over lost goods. But amid the destruction, one truth spread like wildfire. Kale, the feared human, had saved a child. And not just any child. He had saved the widow's daughter. Some whispered with reluctant respect. He risked his life for her. Even beasts can show courage. But others spat with more venom than ever. Do not be fooled. He only wants to claim her. The widow is cursed, and now she clings to a monster. Lyra heard every word, but for the first time, the shame did not crush her. Instead, she stood taller. Each time her eyes found Kyle, she remembered how he had carried Nira out of the fire. No one else had moved. Only him. One evening, as the sky glowed with fading light, Kale sat outside Lyra's hut, sharpening his blade. Nira sat close, humming softly as she played with pebbles. Lyra watched them from the doorway, her heart heavy with thoughts she could not name. When Nira finally went inside to rest, Kale looked at Lyra. His eyes, always sharp and unreadable, now carried a strange weight. I have fought many battles, he said quietly, but none have mattered as much as this. Lyra frowned. What do you mean? He stood, his tall frame casting a shadow against the red sky. I mean you. You and the child. Every time I leave, I feel the pull to return. And when I see the way they treat you, I cannot stand by. Her heart pounded. She wanted to look away, but his voice held her still. I am not a gentle man, Kale continued. I am not soft. I cannot give you a life without hardship, but I can give you protection. I can give you loyalty, and I can give your child a father who will never leave. The words struck like thunder. Lyra's breath caught. Her hands trembled. She had dreamed of safety, of a hand to hold, but she had buried those dreams long ago. You speak as if, she began, but he stepped closer, his voice steady. I ask you to be my wife. Lyra, let me stand with you. Let me claim you and your child as mine. For a moment, silence hung heavy. Lyra's heart screamed with fear and longing. Could she trust him? Could she bind her life to the most feared man in the colony? Her voice shook as she whispered, If I say yes, they will never forgive me. They will call me worse than cursed. They may drive us out. Kyle's jaw tightened. Let them try. I have walked through fire before. I will walk through it again if it means keeping you safe. Tears filled her eyes. No one had ever spoken of her like this, not as a burden, not as a curse, but as something worth fighting for. Her lips trembled. And Nira? She has no father. Kale's eyes softened, rare warmth breaking through his hard gaze. Then let her call me one. I will carry her as mine. But before Lyra could answer, voices echoed outside. A crowd had gathered, carrying torches and weapons. Widow, someone shouted. We have had enough. Choose now. Leave the beast or face exile. The mob's rage shook the air. Stones rattled against the hut. Nira woke crying, clutching her mother's leg. Kale stepped outside, blade in hand, his presence a wall of iron. Come then, he roared. Test your courage against me if you dare. But the mob did not charge. Instead, their leader, a tall alien elder, raised his hand. We will not fight you here, human. But know this. If the widow accepts you, she will be no longer part of us. She will be dead to this colony. The crowd chanted agreement, their hatred spilling into the night. Lyra's chest tightened. This was the price. If she said yes, she would lose the only home she had known. Her daughter would grow up an outcast with no friends, no family but him. Kale turned to her then, his voice low, urgent. The choice is yours, Lyra. I cannot make it for you. But know this, I will not abandon you. Not now, not ever. The world seemed to hold its breath. Lyra looked down at Nira, who clung to her, whispering, Mama, don't be afraid. Her heart shook. She remembered the years of hunger, The nights of cold silence, the faces turned away when she begged for mercy. And then she remembered Cale, his shield in front of her, his arms pulling her daughter from fire, his voice promising she was not nothing. Slowly she raised her head. Her voice trembled, but her words were clear. "I choose him." The mob gasped. "I choose Cale," she repeated, louder this time. "He is my husband now. And Nira is his daughter." Cale's eyes locked with hers. For the first time, a true smile, faint but real, touched his lips. The crowd erupted in fury. "Traitor, shame!" they cried. Stones flew again, torches waved. But Cale raised his blade high. His roar shook the night like thunder. "Then so be it. She is mine and I am hers. Stand against us and I will cut you down." The mob faltered. Some shouted, some fled, but none dared to charge him. Slowly, they scattered into the shadows, their hatred still burning but their courage broken. When silence returned, Lyra fell to her knees, tears spilling freely. Kyle knelt beside her, placing a rough hand on her shoulder. "You are not alone anymore," he said softly. And as Nira climbed into his arms, calling him father for the first time, Lyra realized that though the world had turned against them, she had chosen a man who would never turn away. The bond was sealed, not just in words, but in fire, fear, and courage. The days after Lyra's choice were like walking on the edge of a blade. The colony did not forget. They did not forgive. Each morning when Lyra stepped outside, eyes followed her with venom. Merchants refused her coins. Children were pulled away from Nira's smile. Whispers hissed wherever she walked. She chose the beast. She betrayed her own blood. She is no longer one of us. But Lyra held her head high. Every night Kyle's words gave her strength. "You are not alone anymore." And when Nira laughed in Kyle's arms, calling him father, Lyra knew she had chosen rightly. Still, beneath the surface, anger was building like fire waiting for air. One evening, Cale returned from hunting with fresh meat. As he walked through the colony, a stone flew from the shadows and struck his shoulder. He stopped but did not flinch. His sharp gaze swept the crowd and the air grew tense. "Cowards," he said in a low growl. "You strike from the dark because you fear me." No one answered. But hatred flickered in every eye. That night the fire came. Lyra woke to smoke choking the air. Flames licked the edges of their hut and the sound of shouting filled the night. "Burn the beast out. Drive them away. Let the fire take them." Nira screamed as the walls trembled. Lyra held her close, panic surging. But before she could move, Cale burst in, his blade already drawn. His face was hard as stone, his body moving with fierce purpose. "Stay behind me," he commanded. With one strike, he smashed the burning door from its hinges. Outside, a mob of angry aliens waited with torches and weapons. Their faces glowed red and the firelight twisted with rage. "There he is," someone shouted. "Kill him!" Kyle stepped forward, his tall figure blazing in the glow of flames. His voice cut through the chaos like thunder. "You call yourselves strong? Then face me. But hear this. Touch the widow or her child and your blood will stain this ground." The mob roared and charged. The first attacker swung a crude blade. Kyle moved like a storm, blocking with his arm and striking with brutal force. The man fell gasping, his weapon flying into the dirt. Another rushed him with a spear. Cale twisted, grabbed the shaft and broke it across his knee before slamming the attacker aside. But they kept coming. 5, 6, 10 at once. Rocks struck his back, blades cut his arms, yet he stood like iron, his strikes fierce and unrelenting. Lyra watched in terror, clutching Nira to her chest. Each time a weapon raised toward them, Cale placed himself between his body, a living shield. "Why won't he fall?" someone shouted. "He fights like an animal." No, he fought like a man with something to protect. At last, Cale was forced back against the hut. Blood ran down his arm, smoke stung his eyes. The mob cheered, believing him weakened. But then a small voice cut through the night. "Father," Nira cried, stepping forward despite Lyra's grip. Her eyes, wide and fearless, shone in the firelight. "Don't be afraid." The mob faltered. A child calling the beast father? The word struck them harder than any blade. Cale's chest heaved. He looked at Nira and strength surged back into him. With a roar, he swung his blade in a wide arc, scattering his enemies. "You will not take them," he thundered. The mob broke. Some fled into the shadows, others fell silent, their courage burned away. The fire still roared, but their fury collapsed in the face of Kale's defiance. When the last enemy retreated, Kale dropped to one knee, exhausted. His blade was red, his body marked with wounds. Lyra rushed to his side, tears spilling down her face. "You are hurt," she cried, pressing cloth to his arm. "I have been hurt before," Kale muttered, his voice rough but steady. His eyes softened as he looked at her and the child. But never for something that mattered. Lyra's heart broke and healed in the same breath. She saw the man behind the fear, the strength behind the scars, and she realized that though the world called him a beast, he was the only one who had ever truly stood for her. The colony was silent the next day. The burned hut still stood in ruins, but Kale's victory spread through every street. 10 men could not bring him down. He fought like fire itself, and still he stood for the widow and her child. Some began to doubt their hatred. Others burned with even greater anger. But one truth was clear. Kale and Lyra could not be ignored anymore. That night, under the quiet sky, Lyra sat beside Kale as he cleaned his blade. Nira slept peacefully between them. "You fought for us against all of them," she whispered. "Why?" Kale looked at her, his eyes glowing faintly in the moonlight. "Because you are mine now, and I protect what is mine." Her breath caught. His words were fierce, but they wrapped around her like safety. For the first time in her life, she was not hiding in shadows. For the first time, she was not alone against the world. She had chosen fire, and fire had chosen her back. But deep in her chest, she knew the battle was not over. The colony would rise again, and when they did, it would take more than strength to survive. The colony carried silence like a wound. After the night of fire and steel, no one dared approach Lyra's hut. Kale's defiance still burned in their memories. 10 men had attacked, and yet the human still stood. Some called him a demon. Others, in hushed tones, called him something far more dangerous. A protector. For Lyra, the world felt both heavier and brighter. Her hut was scarred. Her neighbors turned their faces away, yet her heart no longer shook with fear. Each time she saw Kale sit sharpening his blade, each time she watched Nira laugh in his arms, she felt something she thought she had lost forever. Peace. But peace in such a place was fragile. A week later, the elders of the colony summoned everyone to the central square. Torches lit the night, and the air was thick with tension. Lyra held Nira's hand tightly as Kale walked beside them, his expression steady, unreadable. The elder stepped forward, his voice sharp. "This cannot continue. A widow and her child bound to a beast, a human who sheds blood on our streets. He must leave, or we will drive him out." Murmurs rose in agreement. Fear and hate still clung to many hearts, but another voice broke through. An older woman, her face lined with years, stepped forward. "He saved the child from fire. Where were you that night, elder? Hiding while he carried her out?" The crowd stirred. Others began to whisper. "He gave them food. He protected them. He stood when no one else did." The elder's face hardened. "Do not be blinded. He is carnivorous. He is human! He will destroy us in time." At that moment, Nira stepped forward. Her small voice rang out in the square. "He is my father." The crowd froze. All eyes turned to the child. Her voice shook, but she raised it higher. "He saved me. He saved Mama. He is not a beast. He is my father." Her words cut through the air like lightning. Kale's eyes softened just for a heartbeat before his gaze returned to the crowd. The elder spat in anger. "A child's words cannot change the truth." He raised his hand. "If you stay with him, widow, you will be cast out forever. No home, no trade, no kin. You will have nothing." The square grew quiet, every heart waiting. Lyra looked down at her daughter, then up at Kyle. Memories flooded her, nights of hunger, years of shame, fire, fear, and betrayal. And then she remembered Kale's arms shielding her, his voice saying, "You are not nothing." She straightened her back and spoke clearly for all to hear. "I already had nothing, until him." She took Kale's hand and pulled Nira close. "With him I have everything." The crowd gasped. The elder's face twisted with rage. "So be it, you are no longer one of us." He raised his staff, preparing to strike the ground as a final sentence. But before he could, Kale stepped forward, his voice deep and unshakable. "Listen well. You may cast us out, but know this, I am not your enemy. I do not seek your lands or your lives. But if you come for them," He pulled his blade free, its edge glinting in torchlight. "I will fight until none of you remain standing." The silence that followed was heavy. None dared move. They had seen his strength. They had seen his fury. And now they knew his warning was no empty threat. At last, the elder lowered his staff, his voice bitter. "Then go, live in your shadows. You are dead to us." The next morning, Lyra, Kale, and Nira left the colony. Some turned their faces away in anger, others in shame. Yet a few watched in silence, their eyes carrying something new: respect. Beyond the colony, the world opened wide. Forests stretched under the rising sun. Rivers sparkled and mountains stood tall against the sky. For the first time, Lyra did not feel trapped. She felt free. Nira skipped ahead, laughing as she carried a small basket Kale had made. She ran back to him, tugging his arm. "Where will we live now, Father?" Kale looked out at the horizon, his voice steady. "Wherever we choose. The world is wide, and no one will tell us who we are." Lyra walked beside him, her heart swelling with quiet joy. For so long she had lived as a shadow, unseen and unwanted. But now with Kale and Nira, she was more than a widow. She was a wife, a mother, and part of a family that no fire, no hatred could destroy. That night, under a sky filled with stars, they built a small fire by the river. Nira fell asleep, curled in Kale's arms, safe and warm. Lyra watched him, his strong hands holding the child with surprising gentleness. She whispered softly, "You gave us life when no one else would. I never thought I could be happy again. But you gave me that too." Kyle looked at her, his sharp eyes glowing in the firelight. "And you gave me something I thought was lost. A reason to stay, a reason to fight, a reason to be human." Lyra reached for his hand, and for the first time since her husband's death she smiled without sorrow. Above them, the stars burned bright, as if marking the birth of something new, not just survival, not just defiance, but a family, born of pain, forged in fire and bound by a love that no one could break.